Nyepa Gunle Namdula Shing, Yunden Gungi Gemba, Simjin Gungi Nyen Chikun, Tamje Kenla Gun Chan, Women Jeki Yenge Podan, and Dusum Sange Gungi Ngawoni, Rasim Chuku, Nasumantan Zebe, Zawe Lami Shabla So Wide. Ontomar Ontambichu Nyamsulimbi Kunlung Sangpo Nijungi Sambadang Jajub Gesimna Dembikoni Lungichu Tenju Di Tebadang Sambekoni Nyamsulimba Shoes.
In the beginning, please spend a moment arousing an excellent motivation, that of renunciation mind and the mind of awakening, thinking that in this Dharma session you're engaging with the Dharma of scriptures by receiving the teachings, reflecting on the meaning of scriptures, and through that engagement with the Dharma of scriptures, you are actually practicing the Dharma of realization.
Deni Tanganzu Gyud Lama Tenju Di Tebekoni Lobjong Changyore Deni Ta Teba Tsamchi Digmare Tebing Dundi Naransu Nyamlenla Chanin Tokugere Deni Kasubabeki Shungdi Zowodita Tawatenla Babi Shung Yindu Mixe Lamgi Rimba Nguesuda Yunguyo Mare Ante Meduda Anzu Ning Lotu Ningba Densu Kingi Yukure Inayang Anzu Lotu Sawa Mambu Chegita Gyud Lama Te Lobjong Chani Dini Nyamsu Lena Ani Kandis Lengu Gre Se Ki Lamgi Rimba Hamaku Ki Mambuch Yusibare Dinde Yimba Yundu Dini Anzu Da Chachi Molam Ki Nangla Kibu Changchu Sembe Ki Lamgi Rimba Sebuchini Tensha Watiki Nitin Todu Dobuchi Shugere.
So in this Dharma session, we are actually practicing the Dharma, right? We're putting it into practice. So it's really important not to leave the meaning that of the teachings that we have heard as just a theory, but really apply it to our life, apply it to in our path, put it into practice, right? These teachings need to be implemented. So the text that we are actually engaging with, the Gyud Lama, primarily is focusing on the view, on the Buddhist view. It resolves the view. It does not explicitly teach how to practice, right, the teachings found in this text. And therefore, here I'm looking at, I'm giving a brief explanation of the stages of the practice, stages of the path that some more senior students would remember and know, right, how to put these teachings of Gyud Lama or Tantra Shastra into practice, but perhaps some newcomers they don't know. They might not know how to apply what they hear now in these Dharma sessions in their practice. And so to then guide all the senior students and the new students, I'm using the text, right, entitled the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer, where the author, the third Karmapa, summarizes in a really brief, succinct, and very profound, kind of essential manner all the key points of the path of the Bodhisattvas, right, that explain then the stages of practice, and that's what we are looking at the moment.
Chidang anzu Ka-Nying me ki luksela Gyud Lama dabuji lobjon chan yundu zobodi anzu chagya chenpo ki tawa chenpe shungji la ngozin chigi yore. Dinde yundu dini cha chenki nyamlen dang drelbi toni anzu nyamsu lingu yore.
The Tibetan Buddhist schools of Kagyu and Nyingma, they identify this text, the treatise of the Uttara Tantra Shastra, Gyud Lama, as the treatise that expounds the view of Mahamudra, the Great Seal. And therefore, when it comes to really practicing the instructions found in this text, the practice has also something to do with the practice of Mahamudra.
Tadanda chachen molam dinala tensha beke lamki rimbati chidang tekpa chenpe lamki rimbachire kibu chenpoki. Inaya the zo zawadi dini chachen ki dini nyamsu lendan zawadi ma din yore.
The Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer gives a very general also outlook of the stages of the path of the Bodhisattvas, right? But specifically it focuses on the Mahamudra stages of the practice, so the stages of the Mahamudra practice.
Tadordina maransu Gyud Lama nala sunsha beke chagya chenpe ki tawa simge rangshin wasalwa saltong sunjo di ani nganzu tawe kandis tenla papko kare kombe kandis nyamsu lengu kare se di rimbaya shindu sebajini mala di yungo yore.
Gyud Lama nanla yungyore yanan natsu zinchan
Natsu di kasu pape
natsu dend
malam dina.
less. Got it. Well, in short, right now in these Dharma sessions, we are concerned with the way of how to resolve the view of the Mahamudra, how it's explained in the Gyud Lama treatise, and then how to put that view of Mahamudra into practice. And that view of the Mahamudra, which is the main subject matter of the Gyud Lama treatise, is the view on the luminous nature of our mind. In other words, the view on the unity of emptiness and luminosity. So that's what we are concerned with here in these Dharma sessions, how to resolve that view, and then explanation of how to put that into practice, sustain that by means of our meditation.
Ta dela dini nge kazan shubha nashin tsabi sabji sinamino tunda di todo dabu di tsemba nga dabu shore tangbo di lamgi tin karich gogo yore sayadichi nipa di lamgi tokje shirab di dini kandichi ten gogo yore dini sumba di chulmeki lam korangi ngogo dabu di shiba di lam di nyamsu lendang di matulwa kanesi nyamsu lengu gres. Te ngaba di tendeke lam di nyamsu lemba ina tarjin jebu di kandechi tobyong gres keda tenis. Tunda nga dabu chigare.
And the stages of practice of the Mahamudra could be summarized in the 5 points right? Found in the Mahamudra Respiration prayer, in some of the verses of the Mahamudra Respiration prayer. The first point is the support that we all need in order to engage with the path. The second point is the explanation of the way how to rely on our intelligence and our insight that will help us then to traverse the path. The third point explains the main essence of the path. So what is the main kind of point of the path, which is completely undiluted, free of confusion? The fourth point deals with explanation of the way of practicing that path in the most correct and pure way. And the fifth point explains then the fruit, the fruition, the result that will be achieved by following that path correctly.
Tene 가장 다 아주 딘데기 땡땡베기 지제디 달주르 초도 대준 시랍된 신년상된 담비주도 수신좀람 바르지 마치 바 차랍군도 담주 줘버쇼 송바레.
In the last Dharma session, we addressed the first among these 5 points, that is the support that we all need to engage in the Dharma path, and that support explained in the 4th verse of the Aspiration, Mahamudra Aspiration prayer, and the verse reads, in English translation of Nalanda Translation Committee Group, being free and well-favored, endowed with faith, exertion, and prajna, relying on an excellent spiritual friend and receiving the PIF instructions, may we encounter no obstacles to practicing them correctly, and may we practice the holy Dharma through all our lives.
다데 나니 가장 안주 가르쳐 버렸으나 리딘 달줄 쪽에 톱고 그래스. 데니 셈된 데라 대바고 그래. 준디고 그래. 데니 셰랍고 그래스니다. 송변나니 대바당 준디디 쉬신 바래.
This verse points out that when it comes to the support we all need to rely on in order to engage in the spiritual path, the support is twofold. One is the physical support that we all need to obtain, that is the precious human life endowed with 18 freedoms and advantages. And also we need to have the mind support, the correct mind, in order to pursue the path. And here is the text outlines. There are 3 points of the mind support. What we need to be endowed with is faith, diligence, and insight. And among these 3, we have already discussed in the previous class the first 2, that is faith and diligence or exertion. And now we'll continue with the last of the mental support, that's insight, or we can say also prajna in Sanskrit.
데니 셰랍스에디 제단 가르치를 쓰게 그랬으나 쉐랍도 넘버를 제바디 셰랍스니 딘데기 로직을 쓰게 그래.
The definition of this term, which is in Sanskrit prajna, and here we can translate it as insight or wisdom, intelligence. The definition is that it's the mental capacity to discern between various phenomena. So in other words, it's also discernment.
셰랍데라 나란수 다지 군습셰비 셰랍당 된담 넬룩셰비 셰랍스니 니샤죠 그래. 데니 군습셰비 셰랍스나다 지당 나란수 낭술기 죄라 야고죄를 누구죄를 펜토겐죄를 뇌개겐죄를 lang goye chi dan dor goye chi yorwa. Dinzu sebo chini dini penyon dan nimi la soba shebe koni sebo chini yewa chi tukingi lo de la ni shirab sini kunzub shebe shirab sige yore. Dini yang ngaran su la chu nami naso chi nangi yore de ina yang ngarangi nang shaba nanshi midimba chu mangbo yore. Nezu la shimba chi yimba la kimsen mangbo la teni ngaran su la nang su la mintraba chi ki toni nang yungo yore. Tende ma yimba chi ni chu karangi ngo nezu di kare yimba di manur marulwa shekengi lo chi yore. Manzu tsui shindo yila chepa sigire. Nenang tunba yang sigire. Tende tila kare sigire sina niluk dandam shepe sherab sini. Sherab lan dus ni sha chugre.
This quality of the mind to discern between various phenomena, right? Prajna in Sanskrit, Sharab, it actually is twofold, has two focuses. This discernment, discriminating wisdom has two aspects. The one is the discernment that knows relative phenomena, where the second type of discernment or discriminating wisdom is the one that knows ultimate nature of phenomena. So if we look at the first type, right, it's our discriminating wisdom that deals with phenomena as they appear. So just as they are perceived. Because the appearing phenomena could also be discerned in various ways. Like some of them are actually helpful to us. Some are harmful. Some are beneficial, and so they should be accepted in our path. Where other appearing phenomena could be clearly discerned as harmful, full of faults, and should be rejected. Right? So this ability then to see these benefits or defects of appearing mode of phenomena is the discernment, discriminating wisdom that deals with the relative. But these appearances are not sometimes really matching the true nature of phenomena. They appear in some particular way, but that appearance actually is not in harmony with how those phenomena truly are. It happens for many different reasons that somehow this appearing mode seems to be real and true, but in really an ultimate nature, there is this disharmony. Right? So things appear as being true and real, but in reality they're not. And so that discernment, that discriminating wisdom that recognizes then the ultimate nature of phenomena, and that's to say it recognizes how phenomena truly are, right? Not just how they appear, but in real mode of the phenomena. So knowing that correctly, right, we call it the correct mental engagement, the one that can discern true nature of phenomena, the one that can see, in other words, we also call it that the one that sees the kind of the true nature of the one that is where the appearing mode is in harmony with the abiding mode of phenomena. That mental discernment or discriminating wisdom is the second type, the one that deals or knows the ultimate nature.
Dini da sherab ki rangyu la kebe kedang ki rimba dawudi mazu tanda hone yungre.
The stages of developing this discriminating wisdom, the way of developing this discernment will be explained later, because it's exactly what we are dealing with in the following point of the presentation.
다 땡들라 다 땡데시니 류된당 심된데 창사베절라 다 가르치고 그래서나 되니 신인 상텐세 용도와 디절라 게위 신인 상보지 네파르도 땡고 그래 숨바래
But that's not enough, when we're talking about the support for the path, right? This physical support of our precious body endowed with all the riches and advantages, and also the mental support of faith, diligence, that intelligence. That's good. But the text continues and says that once we have obtained the physical and mental supports, what we really need to do then, we need to rely on an excellent spiritual friend, and we ought to receive the PIF instructions from that spiritual friend.
다 지당 아주 남과 상지 발라 지당니 긴 게위 신인 스니 시라기 게 준비지 쓰기래 람 땡땡기 게위 신인메나 아니 하나수 람갈런 드웨기 믹메바 나신지레 송바레 딱 게위 신인 세디 드니 징안줄라 럽중 떼킹기 기겐다고 짱발라 세기요 말에 다 델라드니 진랍 긴규바당 다 딘데기 김세 망고시라 지글라 때니 게비신인 세디 자침부스기 학파도 당한주 나 냠린 지기에나 다 람기 주고 코란이 게비신인남 라마 라틴이 중국에 봐인디 아니 다 메베 메탑지 지기에 봐인디더니 게비신인 야고지 철니 땡고게 해서
For Buddhists, a spiritual friend is very important. It is said that it's a very important condition for the practice of Buddhists. Because if there is no one who shows us the path, then it's like wandering in the road while not having an eyesight, right? Being lost, being blind and being lost. That's kind of the classical example of not having a proper guide, an excellent spiritual friend. And when we talk about spiritual friend, we don't talk only about a teacher who gives us instructions. There's also a lot more to the spiritual friend, such as being endowed with the lineage and broken lineage, having blessings, right, giving blessings. So actually, when it comes to the tantric practice, this teacher, as we often call a lama, right, a guru, is like really the entrance, right, the door to enter onto the tantric path. And so there's absolutely no way to engage with the tantra, with the tantric vehicle, without having that kind of guru that we rely on. So the teacher in that context is absolutely indispensable, cannot do without that teacher. And so therefore the students are instructed to search authentic master and rely on that master in order to practice the tantric path.
딩상라 빼샤나 페제 게위 신인 라마세디 라우터 나신지레도 나저 강반나라 라우터 딩지 미지 고기도와 디메나 아니 대화제 두고미도와 디인디다 말아서 진랍 긴규바스디 진랍 용사기 람가지 고기어봐 트랜스미터 더브지 이게 비신이 라마드 차디게
To give a modern contemporary analogy for guru, for spiritual friend, I would say that a teacher is like a router, like a transmitter that we place in our house so that we can stay connected, that we can go online. Without that router, we can't really connect. So in the same way, to connect with the blessing of authentic lineage, we need that transmitter, we need that router. And that's the spiritual friend or guru.
다 개비 신인디 도당하게 갑라 지당 수수수수기 기초당 증이 망보지 숭여래 다 개치쇼디드니 아 시랍당 드니 수수기 로말라 문이 따지 인제 미콜라 펜지 다 고고도 삼백이 인제 예부디 인지 미지 고고요 숭바리 신인 상보세와 야보 시랍당 인제 예부디 메나 용교요 말이
The sutras and the tantras give various lists of the qualities or qualifications that the spiritual masters need to possess. Right? There are many characteristics that we can talk about, but there are two without which really no one can be rendered as an excellent spiritual friend. And those two qualities, absolutely indispensable qualities for a master, is wisdom and compassion, that pure love for the disciples, that altruistic wish to really benefit the disciples, right? That's on one hand, and then wisdom on another. So those two are of primary importance for anyone to be known as an excellent, like authentic spiritual master.
당 아주 남기 진랍 세그와 진랍 세그와 진랍 세디 간데 세그르스나 진스네 연덴스라 바레 랍스나 포알라 세그레 게비 신인세디 수수라 예비 연덴디 룽아 이숨게 연덴디 롭두라파 포토베지 인지깔라이나 to be able to transfer 덴데 롭두기 삼바당 메바 콜라 가리코구도 캠베토니 덴데기 제투ken기 gebi shinyin chwe bayna tini ngoni dani gebi shinyin sangpo sin chaware sumare
And as for the blessing, that word blessing in Tibetan, Jinlab, consists of two syllables and both have their respective meaning. So the first syllable, Jin, refers to the qualities, where the second syllable of this term, lab, means transmitting or transferring. So in other words, really what we translate as blessing in Tibetan, really in its, has this kind of connotation of to be able to have power to transfer the qualities according to the needs and desires of the disciple. And so the teacher then has that kind of the excellent teacher needs to have that knowledge of what the disciple needs. And then the teacher also needs to have that ability to transfer the qualities that are needed. That's the qualifications of an excellent master as well.
다디기 젤라 신yin 상보디 젤라 가르쳐 버려서는 댄세 찍지도와 신yin 상 댄세 찍지요래
And the Mahamudra Respiration prayer, it states that, let me look literally, it states relying on an excellent spiritual friend. So this term rely on, right, it's also quite important.
시제당 안주 라마 댄세디 라마 냠돌레 데 칼라사 자통 드로세 딘드랑 말에 지당 릉아 이숨기권이 땜바스니 댄수 망보숭요래 이내야 조 가리코고 그랬으나 땡 약쇼다보디 라마기 계랑라 가레 제 랍기도 디제 계랑라 가레 마제 랍기도 디 마제니 라메기 숭샤바디 수수기 미세낭라 라렌타바디라 가레세 그랬으나 라마 땐바스디 계준버리
To understand correctly this term, rely on spiritual friends. So to rely on or follow a spiritual master doesn't mean staying close to a guru and sort of eating all the meals together, drinking tea together regularly. That's not really right what is meant by relying. The text state that there are different ways to really properly rely on the master. And we can do that with our bodies, we can do that with our speech, we can do that with our minds, but mainly, right, the best way to follow, rely on a spiritual teacher is just do what the master says we should be doing and then refrain from doing what the teacher tells us not to do. In other words, following the instructions given by the master, following them in our life, implementing them in our lives. That's the way to rely on a spiritual guru.
Dordina lama ten seti lama la rewa jures la bar kerang la. Lama ki kerang la yebi ki rewa di kerang ki kong bai na dila dit nganzu lami tukong zokbar chi sigirwa. Kisute lama korang la mikse kepsang yo mara ina tsik di dus dawa ji gogudwa. Tunda ngoma di karre lama di ki loma kerang la rewa ji yores. Di rewa di dubar jeba na dila lama ten sigires.
In short, an excellent spiritual teacher always has a hope for for his or her disciples. That's to say that they want us, the disciples, to fulfill their aspiration, right? The aspiration for us. Like there's expression in Tibetan, fulfilling this kind of holy intents of a master, kind of fulfilling, accomplishing the aspirations of the teacher. That really doesn't mean to just kind of teacher gaining something or kind of getting some profit, like we need to give something to teachers so they really obtain it. It rather means that the teacher has this pure intention, like wishes for the disciples. And then from the side of disciples, then they really have to fulfill those aspirations. And that's kind of what we mean by following or relying on the teacher.
Di indu ta ngaranzu lama sangbo yinda mense di yewa che di kago yore. Ini ya lama kashi ki dindi sungudu tai le labo ji yores. Di kante res na. Kisi lama di ki rewa tembe kapsula di rewa di mangche lama korang dan rewa du na di tozo da sambo tango res. Kisi lama di ki rewa kari temba na rewa di kerang dan rewa yoba ina di lama di sangbo yibita res. If he is more interested in himself, ni to salo tango res. Kisi lama di ki korang le labe loma ki dedugla interest dan conscience yoba ina di lama sangbo yibita res. Di le labo doa.
Generally, it's not that easy to discern between who is authentic master, who is that excellent spiritual teacher, and who is not. But the teachers say that there is one easy way, right? There's one easy way. When we look at those aspirations or the kind of projects of the teacher, right? These hopes of the teacher, his or her project. If those aspirations, those intentions have something to do with the teacher's personal gain, then we need to be careful, right? We need to watch out. But when we look at this kind of intention, hopes of the teacher, and those hopes are really purely have something to do with the suffering or happiness of the disciple, right? Then we can say that, right, that's a really good sign. So as Khenpo said in English, right, we need to check if the teacher is more interested in himself, right? That's the kind of warning sign, right? Where a teacher is more interested in the benefit of disciples, that's the good sign. So sorry, that's Khenpo then said. That's how we can. That's really the way then for us to see who is an authentic spiritual master.
인디다 그냥 라마 자가도디 라마 디기 nga chik che nga ni che sene khorang ge logi mang ba shigi duna an to sab sab che gu ro ta lama de gi ni ta kirang de bo yin bes kirang ro kirang kang ge kare dos ke che de gi na da lama de nga su ki lob du kin de du la concern ye be ge chun che do ro.
So in this way, when a disciple goes to have an audience with a master, right, comes to meet a teacher, and if the teacher talks primarily about one's own accomplishments, one's own projects, oh, I did that, I did this, then we need to be careful about that kind of teacher, right? Where when we come to a teacher and instead that master, that guru is concerned with our own well-being, like, how are you? What's your story, right? The teacher asks, what's troubling you, right? What's your kind of worries? That's really a good indication of the pure intentions of a teacher.
ta che dang anzu beba ki ke la ina ta ge bi shenin ge ken lama zawe lama se dun zu sik se bo yore ta inji la di sik di kheba me di tis kale khabu do ba ta che dang ge gen se dang ge bi shenin se dun zu ta che dang anzu ge gen se dang su su lob jong jang sa dun zu da dun zu zawe lama se ge yo mar ba dun zu to ye zu ka ga tani ya nam ju ngan zu da lama ge bi shenin se lab di den one da ne ge su su lo ka sa din su su la ji lam tyen ken gi yi chi che sa ki tini a be din zu le se ge re din du da di di yang in chi ge la di shira ye wa di me on di dis ka le ka bu do wa.
So in Tibetan, we have a very clearly distinguished terminology when it comes to addressing different types of teachers. So we say a teacher in Tibetan Gegyan is like teacher in school, right? When we have someone we are learning from. Well, not necessarily school, could be musical teacher, right, etc. Someone we're gaining knowledge from. So in Tibetan, when we use that term, Gegyan, it really has nothing to do with a spiritual master or our root teacher, root guru, right? But it's when we say the specific terms we use in Tibetan, like Lama, Geveshinian, which usually we translate as spiritual friend. So a Lama who is a spiritual friend or a root teacher, when we specifically, right, highlight that root guru, then we are talking about our master who guides us on the path to liberation. But in English, there is no clear, distinguishment. Well, we do address our teacher as a teacher, right? So we do use this term teacher, which kind of the same term that we use for teachers in school, like a primary school. So it's a little bit more messy than in English because there's no clear, like border lines between. But in Tibetan, we really would not call some teachers a root master and vice versa. So
Ta tanda ngan zu lama ge bi shenin se di zawe lama da wa tin de le se ge re ta chi da ngan zu pe na nga da wa ngan zu lob jong jang da wa tin zu ko chi knowledge exchange sam ji chi ge yo pan di de la ni shida shida ngan zu sim ja je ko ya mar wa lama ge bi shenin se di ta kan de res na one da ne ki ta chi lama ge bi shenin se la ba re di ne ba chum bo yo se re ka res na chi da ngan zu shenin se na tok bo da wa la ba sik di tok bo mang bo yo re pin ja mang bo yo re 다 nga zu dokpo phama punja chasang da ngarang zu ki shedan yin slap chu go re yine tinzu chasang ti lama mare slap re kar re sna nga zu la dokpo khasu ya ko ju yoba yine re phama ki nga zu la khasu chaba yoba yine re khasu yin ba yine nga zu la tharba dang thamji khimbe lam ten tu marwa ta dokpo yebe nang ni dokpo thoshe dang dokpo ke cheshe di su re sna ani 수술라 타르바당 탐지 김베 람땡힌데 이마송자 라마 게위싱인 스니 슈바레 숨바레
So, in the context of talking about the qualifications, we're really only talking about those kind of gurus, spiritual friends, right? We're not talking about a teacher who shares the knowledge with the disciples, like in the context of these Dharma sessions, like me, for example, right? Here, you don't need to worry about like those qualifications we just discussed, right? This is not the different context. So here we're talking about a really spiritual friend. And by friend, we mean that, of course, we can have many friends in our life. We can have relatives, right? It's all good, but they're not then rendered as spiritual friends, as our gurus, right? As our lamas, because they can't really show us the path to liberation and the path to omniscient state of a Buddha. So therefore, we really use this terminology of like a lama spiritual friend to point out that this is not just any common friend or relative that we have, but it's a really specific, master lama who shows us the spiritual path to liberation and omniscience. And that's where we have to discuss the qualifications, right, of that kind of spiritual friend master.
다 이들 책지도와 셰세 책지래 셰세 책디 인질의 프렌드들 유도와 다디 책디 야보도 이나 삽삽지고도 가르레스나 다라버도 딩상 뒤설라 디콜라 가서 도바 방법 요구도와 간수 라마 텐디 라마디 냠도 도보 제고래 디고 그래 아니 라마디 타른 거질라 샤고 그래 세다 디디디니 kalekhabu chiyore lama ngone kalekhabu yore la loma ngone kalekhabu yore ta di tangbo shena tachik du di topo dawo tengo gres lamna ya kalekhabu resha tachik du pe lama sene ta rungbu jire shuri kangla nganzu shira shira dibu jigi yo maris labai ne di yang kanga jithegi du di indi da tili kimse mangbo shira yungu du doge kapda nga kap di indi da soso gi dini kapto la samlo tani dini kap la tha nyewo je kap la tos tha ring san sha ko de tha ring bol sha dini ge che sho de da do kap re nga kap re la me sum sha gyu de la do ba je ko du ro ba de ba be je tang ko du shira be je tang ko du se de cha sang di nga zu in ji ka la ma so shira ki technical je re sha de so so la ma dan di be ko ni nyam nyung thong ne do ya re ma do je tha chik du 아니 네버 제고 그래 타식도 다른 부시하고 그래서는 라고 주네요. 양데스 년가 잡지 레샤 딘디다 수수 냠뇽 거 토니 지 도게지 레도 다간다 밸런스 지고 그래서 딘이 나로라.
So you see this term spiritual friend, Kalyana Mitra in Sanskrit, exactly. Mitra, Gevishinin in Tibetan, indeed means a friend, like we say in English, a spiritual friend. And using this kind of word, friend, can create a lot of doubts or sort of hesitation in the minds of the disciples, such as, so does it mean that we need to become really close with our spiritual master, like in a way of really befriend our spiritual master? Or actually, should we like keep the master kind of removed from our personal life and sort of just go for instructions like to someone who sits on the throne and not really make that personal, intimate connection with the master? And it's really hard because there's no clear guidelines. There's no way I can tell you do this and that will be right, or don't do that. Because in either of those two ways, there things to be said for it and against it. So it's really not easy for the teacher, and it's not easy for the disciples, right? Because both ways to be really close with the guru, like in this friendly mingling in a friendly way, can be dangerous, but also sort of not having any personal connection, affiliation with the guru, all just coming to the crowd, as a crowd, and guru is somewhere in the throne and you never talk with that guru. That's also problematic, right? So what I will tell you is that we need to use our own discernment and look at the context, because it's all contextual. There's not like one clear guidelines that work for everyone in all situations, right? We need to look at the situation. We need to use our own intelligence. We need to rely on our own experience, because sometimes it's better to be close at some moment with the guru and really like be sort of friendly, and sometimes it's not. And we need to keep away, like that would be better. And also it depends a lot, what are we talking about? Is it like say, kind of sutric teaching context, or is it a tantric path, right, that we are talking about? So also another question that is really important, like then, are we meeting the instructions of a teacher with some kind of discriminating wisdom? Do we need to doubt what teacher says? Do we need to use our own intelligence, or should we rely purely on faith and take everything at face value? Again, there is no clear answer. It's not like we always should be doing one thing or another. Again, it really depends, and a lot depends on kind of us gaining that experience and really discerning each context, each situation. In other words, we need to have a very balanced approach.
Tadi keransula dangansu Buddhist background ke culture mena dis khako yorwa gom gore dise mangboji gogre tini keranta Buddhist background ke culture nang rang ni tini chalong jungba enani dinzu rangsing ji lamsang ji lamsang sinamin do khanda de detsam ge ji kerang ki intuition do ji yungre tindi the Buddhist culture ti sunga ju jangko do ba.
Well, also, it's much harder for those who don't come from a Buddhist culture, Buddhist background. It takes a long time to really understand the protocol, the traditions, the culture that surrounds following a spiritual master or a guru, right? Taking a long time to really accustom oneself to those new ways, new culture. For those who are born into Buddhist tradition, born in the Buddhist culture, it might be enough, because there already will be this kind of intuitive sense of correct way of approaching this guru-disciple relationship. So need to also learn about the culture, kind of the protocols, the cultures around this topic.
Chedang anzu peche nangla kerangi lama la sangye nashin chini tenpa ina sangye ki jinlap chu thop gire isla bare. In kerangi lama la jangchu semba nashin chini tenpa ina jangchu sembe jinlap chu thop gire is. In kerangi lama la mi nashin chini tenpa ina mi ki jinlap chu thop gire sung bare. Kati zu yang tozo nga ki kechare chedang.
Also, the texts state that if you see your spiritual master as a Buddha in person, you will get from that master blessing of the Buddha, blessing worth of getting blessing from a Buddha. If a then statement kind of continues and says, if you as a disciple regard your spiritual master, spiritual friend as a bodhisattva, the blessing that you get from the teacher will be the blessing of a bodhisattva. And if you regard the spiritual master as an ordinary person, well, you will get the amount of blessing worth of getting it from an ordinary person. This, of course, also is very much teachings in the tantric tradition, right?
다 안수 라마라 대바 고스 먹고 수고도 다 대바디 요나 야보라와 대바 메네양다 라마기 로마라 다 코닝제 녜치도 깔리 잡고도 섬이 닝제지제 아니 로메게 라마라 다 코랑 나기 체들지 지 깔리 잡고도 우주 잡고도 섬이기 닝제지 검샤와이네 땡땡디게 personal connection 쇠를 네버쯤 버치 쓰고 있어요. 지기질레 닝제샤나 띵 아주 삼마땅투서와
If depamena,
대바 깨트는데 약속으로와 대바 메네다 라마디 나게 체도를 뒤수지 땡기도 가랑 깔레직 잡기도 쓰러봐
yes.
되게 삼봉아 땅도로와
Also, the topic of having faith, kind of really the instructions that the disciples have to generate faith towards the teacher.
디양 배셔나라 된데다 숙민도데 나랑 그 초와다고 나랑 얘기 초와다고
Lasala.
중단 대바께네
But
대바검네 빼야보러와 따지다니 대바께 마도나 랄럽니게 발라 편준라 닝제 삼나야 디 계주무시라래 커넥션도 용도와
right, so the instructions found in the text are very clear. All the disciples, right, have to approach spiritual master with this faith and reverence. And what about those who don't feel that faith? And here I'm not going to share anything found in the text. This is my personal, Khenpo says, understanding, right, which I think might benefit those who don't feel that amazing amount of faith. Of course, if people do, great. You don't need to rely on what I'm going to say now. If you already have pure faith to your teacher, you have a teacher, you have faith, it's all good. But it's not that easy for everyone, right? And so if there is you don't find yourself in that position where you just feel that devotion, faith to a teacher, I feel that, having a relationship of mutual empathy, compassion, would be already a really good beneficial relationship between a student and the master, where the student feels like, wow, the teacher is giving me this time, giving me instructions, and feeling that appreciation, understanding that the teacher has that compassion, right, to spend time and give me instruction, and already appreciating that.
at least at least he's trying.
Well, the lamagi samgidu yana the lomagi.
Lama.
The lama trying. Try chicken the lamara. So disciple will think, well, at least lama is trying. And then also the lama, the guru will also feel that kind of appreciation. Well, here's the disciple. I also feel this kind of empathy, spending this time, all this kind of effort the disciple is putting into my projects. Let's say these kind of mutually respectful, empathetic, kind relationship could be already really good if there is no faith, right? Of course, if there's faith, that's the best. But if there's not, I'm sharing this just my personal understanding as a kind of guidelines for someone who's struggling with faith, that could be a good ground already to approach a teacher.
Tene anda shenyin sangbodi tensa베체라 가르치고 그랬으나 tene 담비 쥐톱니 숭바래 다 라메기 듄니 담가 쉬고 그래 취 쉬고 그래 숭베든다래.
Then the Mahamudra Aspiration prayer continues, and it says that we also have to receive, it says receiving the PIF instructions, right? So when we rely on an excellent spiritual friend, we don't stop just there, but what's important is to go on and receive these teachings, these PIF essential instructions from a master.
다치당 안수 기긴 고 말해와스 안수 데블로나 디기르와스니 근데 람나르와 케바가레 여르스는다 케바 여르 베네딩사 Google 당 Wikipedia 다오지라 찾아봐야나 아니 아주 라마 고에 민두가 세르와 ngala Google 요 ngala Wikipedia 요 슬라바이나 비지 디그와 아주 디와 망버지 랭딘이 말에 톱용 거와
Some people argue, well, why do we need a living master, flesh person? Why it's not enough just to read books, spiritual books? Or some say, like, really, I don't need that spiritual Lama master. I have Google and Wikipedia to answer all my questions.
다디 디인디 단다딜랑아주 담각세지도와 담각세게 책디 코지당게 책 말에 디시라기 믹스에게 책지래 아주다 아주 에너지 다딜라 담각세 딜라 둔다 고에 카시셔리 지당 우바데시 세들와 다 담각세 그래 맹아세 그래 다 더블더블 Google 당 Wikipedia ki kerangla knowledge take rete damga zawani ne te thok mar kheba dier damga sedi chidang gowa gare len chogeresna labja jire sigde labja de la damga slabar yin yang kaus ba be ke damga sedi lama digi lama khorang gi nyamnyung gi thone loma digi kamdang wangbu meba den chu shebe kone khorang la kapdang kapsum baba la gari gogi yobati tada tebadela giving exactly what is needed to the different situation rwa penang azu mi na debayena menda menrwa ine ya nesa khorang rang la pembe menchi tetu bayna tadi ngone dani men saborwa din di tang azu damngak se de sabore se lama la tengu gre damga shu gre se kimsen dire tadi ngazu dep log tini dene jene tsane raya yo mare karresana damga se dila standard damga yo mare ti shiragi personal redwa ti lama gi mado hagu mare loma gi gyu kare yimenti ndi indi dordina damga se na ngazu memba kheba ki nesa la tata phegi mentena pe niba chumbo yung ba minasa lamsang daru ba ti mado men kanju maju ngazu trial dawajin sade ba ina kale khabur ba o tende gitini digantini theory maimba ngazu practical instruction tende jilatin kare segoresna damga sungbare tadi injimiji susuke lama kumdini rako gormado shimani toptugu mare
When we say beef instruction, that term damnak in Tibetan, it really stands out from being just any general kind of instruction, right? Upadesh in Sanskrit, like kind of this oral beef instruction. We need to understand what that term means. When we search an answer in a book or Google, right, we will get some answer or some knowledge. So we will say we got knowledge, but we will never be able to get beef instruction from a book or from a Google. What is beef instruction? In essence, it's an advice which entirely based on the experience and knowledge of a person, right, to whom that instruction is given. So knowing that need of a disciple, that kind of predisposition of a disciple, his or her mental attitudes, his or her desires, his or her needs, right? Knowing exactly what is needed and also knowing what's exactly needed in a particular situation. Again, it really depends on the context at what kind of situation, what kind of context that kind of person is asking a question. So the beef instruction really is the advice that's given according to the need of a person in that particular distinctive situation. And that's just like basically doctor prescribing the exact medicine that's needed in that very moment, right, to cure a patient. And this cannot come from reading a book because there is no standard PIF instructions. It's not standardized that everyone will get the same answer. It's really personal, and only the teacher can do that, knowing what is that kind of need, desire, predisposition, interest of a disciple in that particular situation. It's like a doctor giving the exactly right amount of medicine, the right medicine. It's not just some kind of trial, right? Hit and miss sort of, oh, maybe this will help, maybe not, but knowing exactly what to give. And that comes from experience, right? A very skilled physician will be able to prescribe that correct medication that will heal. And that's not theoretical. It's not just like, oh, I learned it from a book. It comes from experience, from knowledge, and this, therefore, the PIF instructions are always very practical, right? And that's what we as disciples need to receive. And the only place to really receive that kind of personal PIF instruction is then a spiritual master.
다 yang azu kapla damgak sedi pe chi sik pe minda ba chi yesare ta didi log ne ha ko na ani chi cha du ge yesare ngazu mangbo ge ting sa ina chi secret sig dwa dinde chowa ji yong ge da ngan zu la chi beba din zu ngan zu mi kha she ge chi pe ja ji pe ma chi sik kha she ji be sha ro sam sam su do ji dinde kha ya mare kar res na ngan zu da damga chasangdi garab dorje jamba shinni kanse garab dorje tang khong namba gi damga chasangdi ngaju lo chocho yore lela kale khabu ka yamra chi khashi khashi ro damga sapshwe dinzu lela bu jin ngaju lo to gore ting ting ye dangi shwe na shi damga se de ko ji chi khashi ji di thongdu samal pe minda ba chi cha do go de samtene mare.
Also, we shouldn't misunderstand, should be really careful not to misunderstand PIF instructions is some kind of secret code language that only few, kind of initiated people can understand. Like, like this kind of something secretly hidden behind the words in this text, and only few can really decipher what is that. Right? This is not PIF instruction. PIF instructions are something we all can really read, like Garab Dorje gave the really most profound PIF instructions that are translated. They're out there, you can read them, right? The most profound ones. So don't misunderstand PIF instructions as this some sort of secret only for the initiated people kind of, special language.
The damgak sedi chi sik khashi chi la sigi mare damgak sedi nyamnyung jing lama jinlap jing lama megi jing loma chosa dipjang ngon to tinde mangbo chi chakin zum yong de kapsula magic chi chaya yores ti chagwa de la damga sen ti ko ling ko to amado chi pecha pe chi yore ti longna de ni chi hops kala topa gyula ki yong de ni sanu tang yo mare.
But also, it's not just enough then to have those profound words of Garab Dorje, read them and like, okay, well, it's enough, I got it. It's not going to happen like that. So what really happens when we talk about the magic of PIF instruction is that we need to have that master, the spiritual friend who has that experience, that kind of knowledge, and has that power to transmit blessing. We need to have the disciple at the same time who is devoted, the one who has already worked on purifying the defects, the stains of the mind, and gathering merit, right, gathering wisdom. And when those two meet, the experienced teacher who can transmit blessing, the devout student who purified, obscurations, gathered accumulations, then the magic of receiving PIF instructions really takes place. Then the PIF instructions will go exactly as they need to go and will hit the right spot. So again, without those ingredients, it's it's not enough to just read those words. It's not going to be equal to receiving the PIF instructions, as the Mahamudra Respiration prayer says.
다 담가 딘주 만주 슈디 개치쇼지드 가르에서는 다 라마라 메규 다나 개차베체라 되니 당한수 개치쇼디 프리컨셉트 지규메레 디제나티네 담가디기 팽기 말에 페나 계랑 맹강라 도디 nga 당분이 디멘디 사기 디멘 사기 메스니 계랑기 프리컨셉션이 도바이나 아니 암지기 계랑 떼샤베 메디 계랑 사기 메 띵알로 고기 미두슬라바이나 용고 말와 계랑 고기 유주 말데 이네야 you might not want it but you might need it 와 디제디 다 암지기 가레 암질레 이제 제국으로 와 계신 버디 근데 암지기 다 맨디 카고여 계랑기 사도 메바이네야 계란나 고해주나 아니 사고라봐 암지디 떼버라봐 그 하고 그여봐 계란기 내자들 팽기여 봐디 딘디 당분이가 맨디 사기 맨세니 계란기 프리컨셉션이 암지디 땜바에는 암지디 계란을 쥐어두고 말해 딘나신 담가슈베 값을라 당분이 나디 고고민도 세니 나중에 프리컨셉 expectation 숙청버지니 침바에나 라면 담가데 소소라 페마도 보영서 디 계신 보시고지 셈바디 가르쳐 보는 가지고 있다 암지 땡가도디 암지레 이체자베절라 암지 지송만 하신지 소소 셈다 쥐니 아니 디 제거로 봐 덴디 삼도 주고 거다
What also is important, really like the most important part from the disciple is to approach PIF instructions without any preconceived notions, like already having some preconcepts, as Khenpo says. Like, for example, if you, before going to hospital to see a doctor, already have decided, I will not take that medicine, but I will only take this one. And then when doctor prescribes you something, you say, I don't want this one. Well, you see, you came already with some preconceived idea that you will not take this medication or, but the thing is that maybe it's not about what you don't want, but it is actually about what you need to get better. And the doctor knows. So it's really important to already have that trust in the doctor, right? If you want to get better. Right? The doctor can't help a patient if the patient comes and says, well, this I need, this I don't want, right? This will not help me. And then, well, the doctor is powerless to help that kind of patient, right? Who already has that whole baggage of the ideas, what will help and what will not help. So trusting that the doctor taking up the medication prescribed by the doctor, will then enable that patient to heal quickly. In the same way, this goes exactly the same way for following spiritual master and receiving PIF instructions from that master.
아주 갑갑라 this lager와 is not what I'm looking for say로와 this is 당분이 계랑 가리 고기 위해서도 계란게 다 쫓아버려. 이 계란라 팽기 연나 팽기 매바이나 계란게지. 아니 덴데스 담가 님바이나 되니 얘네야 야고 연구 말해. 갈래가고 연구 팽이 갈래가고. 덴데 딱지 나서이나지 preconcept 매바 explore 제 고도 지기인 삼백이 뜻. 덴데 삼바고니 담가디 님 와.
Sometimes, as we say, it's not what I'm looking for. But that means that you have already decided what you're looking for before even starting to look. And in this way, it's really hard to help. Really hard to help that person who has already decided and has a lot of preconceived ideas what will help, what will not. So really important to approach PIF instructions in this kind of very open state, exploring it. Whoa, wow, what will come at the other end of it, without having these all sorts of already preconceived ideas, what will happen, what will help or not. Then in that way, PIF instructions will not work if you have already all of that. But if you approach it in a very open, curious, like really like an explorer way, then that's where PIF instructions can work.
다 데라 칙디 다 인질에 예매하고 마선 베발라 담비 쥐스니 칙지도아 담가라 가리랍 것이니 쥐스니 라바레 빼다고지잖니 가르치니 쥐스 라바레스나 남규 아주 쥐세리데 코 아주 초바르 제키 페나 아주 미다고지 다 나니 시도여나 멘디 사운드 멘디기 미디어 초바르 제그와 미그 속도야 쇠용 거와 근데 난신 당아라주지 갑갑라 최 둠니 빼 탕다부지 최 날데베 갑술라티 오니 날바야 쇠바르 제킨 타르비기 속자 타르비기 속도 소밤 짐바르 제베기 멘다부디 쥐다부디 담가차데기 예베 송산 딜라 카르라스네 담비 쥐스네 라바레 숭바레
There is the analogy that is very beautiful in Tibetan, how we really describe the PIF instructions. I'm not sure, Khenpo said that's kind of also found in English, rendered in English. So we really say that these PIF instructions are like the holy ambrosia, right? That liquid that can revive those who, we can say, kind of restore the life force, life power of those who are at the age of losing it. Like something that, like this ambrosia, yes, we say that will revive the tired, the ones that are losing that life force. And so that's what we really call the PIF instructions in Tibetan. It's like this nectar, right? That nectar, divine ambrosia that we, by, upon receiving it, we will be restored, we will be revived, so that we will uphold that liberation, right? We'll uphold that path towards liberation by receiving that reviving divine nectar. That's how PIF instructions also described.
데니 디젤라 가르도 담비 쥐투니 출신도 바세요 다 디디 양절 빼샤요레 베낭안주 출신둡스나 마노르 마툴바 마툭바 안주 맨더버지 사고고네야고 맨디 출신도 땡고 봐 쇼베사 랍디 쇼베사 뉴공사 랍디 뉴공사 데니 데데 세바에는 소소라 야보 펜지로 봐 데나신 취둡당 코란디안 데니 까당 땡주 난 게체쇼데다 소소기 라마기 가레라기도 원로 땅 세기도는 원로 땅 것이 냠는 제 되기수는 것이 냠는 제 미닥바 곰 세기도는 미닥바 곰 봐 숭바나신기 라렌타와들라 가르세 그래서는 수신도 봤어요 그래 수신도 라스
The text then continues and it says that then we need to practice them correctly. So next stage is then, upon receiving the PIF instructions, is to put them into practice in this really correct, unmistaking way. Not mixing it up, without confusing and mixing things, but practicing correctly. Just like when we prescribe medication, we will take it at the right time of the day, right? The dosage that needs to be taken in the morning will take in the morning, the one afternoon will take in afternoon. So same way when it comes to the words of the Buddha or the commentaries given by the followers of the Buddha, but most importantly is the spiff instructions given by one's own Lama spiritual friend, right? Those need to be put into practice correctly. That is to say, if the Lama says you need to practice Nyondro, the preliminary practices, we'll have to practice the preliminary practices. If a spiritual teacher says you need to practice the main practice of a deity yoga, that's what we will have to take up as our practice. If a teacher instructs us to meditate on impermanence, then we'll have to meditate on impermanence. That's what we mean by practicing those instructions correctly.
Tini tsushin drup se diya tunda tsogo chik di ta susu lobchong chang shakwa ta nyen shakwa dinzu chik ngune dani soso la nyongwa tunkyu yoba chi chego kore sungpari. But the intellectual understanding tsamji mayin ba chini chi experiential ki level la lepto ba chi chego kore.
Another important meaning of this line of practicing them correctly points out that when it comes to PIF instructions, we shouldn't just leave those as something we have heard. So, okay, we received them, meaning we understood and heard them, but that's not enough. That's very theoretical. But what is really important is then to gain experience, really taste the kind of gain that, experience that taste, that flavor of those instructions. And that's done by putting them into practice. So we need to make that theoretical understanding and transfer it into experiential one.
Tatini tama dida barche machi par sungbarwa. Ta ngaranzu tambichu drup yongdu gyumse mangbo jila tini barche mangbo yore. Ta chidang barche sina nganzu lega chik che dite kapsa lega dila ma chik interrupt chekin sutawa. Tendeki energy dila barche sigurwa. Dini barche la dini chidang chi barche, nangi barche, sami barche dini sumbar. Ta nganzu chi barche sidu ta chidang chungwa ke barche dawa ta na ca ta chi ki chagi dang ma dang mangbo yungurwa. Ta nangi barche sidu gobi nyamlin che yungdu dini sem dila doja shidang ngayal tato dendeki mangbo chi yungu yore. Dinzu nangi barche re. Ta chidang nangi barche nyi nangla du chogo yore. Yang kap la tini nganzu ta sangwe barche sen tini shagidwa. Sangwe barche sen ta nang barche yinpa kaanshi la tini penna nizin tawa dawa tang. Senzin tawa dawa. Tende ki bakcha nyumong khurang rakpa jungsa ki tini shi ki diba tende yorwa. Tenzo la sangwe barche segwa.
Gonta tamati
Nizin
dan.
nizin dawa tang. Senzin dawa tende yorwa. 당하는 전에 시제 대비수라고 뭐 딘줄라 딘 상외 발제 있어요. 딱 강다 녀몽 계사기 시자다고 딘줄. 바자 타와 딘줄라.
This line also says that may we encounter no obstacles when it comes to practicing those PIF instructions. So at last, right, when it comes to our practice, we pray that we may encounter no obstacles. But the thing is that we do encounter obstacles, many obstacles, for many various reasons. So what we call obstacle is basically anything that has that kind of interruptive energy, the energy that interrupts our practice. And we divide the obstacles into the outer types of obstacles, the inner, and sometimes also we add this kind of innermost or secret obstacles. The outer obstacles would be anything that interrupts our practice due to the elements of forces of nature, right? It could be our physical ailments, sicknesses, or having just not enough some kind of circumstances, provisions for us to engage in the Dharma practice. When it comes to the inner obstacles, that has everything to do with the mind. It's really all these mental poisons that arise when we practice the Dharma, such as frustrations and desires and pride or jealousy, right? All of those difficult states of mind and the inner obstacles that disrupt our practice. And kind of those two, outer and inner, is really enough to sort of summarize all the types of obstacles. But if we want to go into more detail, sometimes we also talk about this most subtle, innermost types of obstacles. And that's kind of just subdivision of the inner, right? Or because they still pertain to the mind, but they pertain to the most subtle tendencies of our mind, such as the tendency for dualistic fixation or subtle tendency to characterize things or grasping to characteristics, right? In other words, we really call those kind of subtle mental tendencies cognitive obscurations. And those are actually a foundation, really root for all of other emotional type of obscurations, such as obscuration of disturbing emotions. So it's mental obstacle, but really more subtle, the ones that really cause all of the other difficult mental states to arise.
다 되는 간주 등상 대치당 간주 깨지셔봐이나 최 람라 주는 냠린 지용도 다 고대부터버지나 디바디 간주 overly excited obscuration lamna tiksare다 그래서 고당고 되와라 되니 overly disappointed 로와 다디 가와니 연구열에서나 되니 unrealistic expectation 당 unrealistic disappointment 다고지 차도디 되니 아주 람기 바르치루도와 다디게 좀 버려 pe mese excited chagiyo marila yang pe mese disappointed chagiyo mari di balance ting ni to ko dwa
In reality, like when we talk about obscurations that obstruct our Dharma practice, really we can sort of divide those obscurations into two: being overly excited, overly disappointed, right? And that would be our main obstacles, really. So basically, it has everything to do with us having this kind of unrealistic expectations, and so we get really overly excited, but then when those unrealistic expectations are not met, we get overly disappointed. So we need to watch out for that and really balance those out.
laso ta barche machi par charab kundu tamje cho barsho sumbarwa ta thame sidi monam rawa ta di sedi tordina lam ki tendela ta kondu shube dinzo gogyores ta jurcho depatan chundu shirap tan ten kebi shenyen sangbo ten de tunin dambi chu top 아니 토바나신 두발람 바르시 마중 warji 아니 ngarang serapta kewa kazu lemba ene kewa lemba chasangdi dindechi dini sangboji dang kokab sangboji dambiche yabuji dubto bar sho sene dini malam gyabe chegre.
And the last line of this verse reads that, may we practice the holy Dharma through all our lives. That's the actual aspiration part of this prayer. So this verse then explains the support that we need to pursue the spiritual path of the Dharma. And of course that includes, as we have talked about, having precious body equipped with 18 freedoms and advantages, developing faith, being diligent, discriminating wisdom, meeting and relying then on a spiritual master, friend. Not only that, but also receiving the PIF instructions, accomplishing them, putting them into practice without meeting any obstacles. So all of this then, when we really have all of that, what was just mentioned, we understand that we have this excellent opportunity. That's the support for the Dharma path, because it's all of that creates excellent, amazing opportunities to follow, thrive on the Dharma path. And so we pray then that may we always in all our lives then encounter and have this excellent opportunities of all those supports for our practice.
라서 다 아주 데링 돌드나 아주 카레콜라 토슴 제바레스나 되니 샘딘 시랍고 그레스 되니 게춘버디 게비신인 상보 땡고 그레스 되니 게비신인이 되니 담나 슈고 그레스 담나 사야디 그레스 되니 출신도 두고 그레스 다 된저 아주 차상데 가르레스나 람기 땐 망보여르다 된저 맨은 메동 같은 소리 숨바래.
In short, in today's Dharma session, what we have learned and what we have reflected upon is that the remaining mind support, we discussed that that's the discriminating wisdom, and that we need to develop that kind of discernment. And on top of that, we talked about the necessity to rely on a qualified spiritual friend, a Lama spiritual friend. And we talked about necessity of receiving PIF instructions, and I explained what we mean by PIF instructions. And then we don't leave those instructions, right, as a theory, but we talked about the necessity to put them into practice and gain real experience from them, and we need to practice them correctly and without encountering obstacles. So all of this, and what we discussed in previous class also, then constitute the first of the 5 topics that we're looking at, which is the support for our spiritual path. Of course, there are many types of support that we need to receive to be able to follow the path, but these ones, the ones that we mentioned, they are absolutely indispensable. So without this, then we cannot really pursue the path, follow the path. So they are absolutely what we need to develop and possess.
장주 샘주 림보제 마게 바나마게 규렌지 게바 냠바라 메바야 고네 gond은 펠바레쇼